All right, it being 7 o'clock, I hereby call to order this meeting of the Kenmore Planning Commission. First item on the agenda is citizen comment. Any citizen wishing to render comment, please come up to the podium on our left, your right, state your name, your address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have a sign-in sheet? Thank you, Bridget. All right, I'm going to call the names that are on this sign-in sheet. I realize some people may have signed in just to let us know that you're here and didn't intend to speak, which is fine. Just let me know that when I call your name. If I mispronounce your name, please correct me when you come up to the podium. The first name is Robert Spurlock.
Good evening. My name is Robert Spurlock. I live at 7021 Northeast 181st Street. Just down the block from here in Jim's Mobile Home Park. It's owned by Jim Perkins, and I'm a mobile home owner there. I've been there 30 years, and I think on my thoughts today, I would like to, I would sense that it's setting a moratorium would be a sound idea in order to give all affected mobile homeowners a chance to respond and come to these meetings and hear what the commission is getting ready to recommend to the city council. And with that, I think setting a moratorium will be quite a good way of doing things to make sure everybody gets a chance to have their input into this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Next name on the list is Russ Millard.
Members of the Commission, thank you for your time. We just wanted to reiterate what we've said before, is that we're very much in favor. I'm sorry, my name is Russ Millard.
Thanks.
You announced me, so I thought. I'm sorry.
No, that's true.
Russ Millard, Inglewood East.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
We're very much in favor of a positive approach to creating sustainable housing. We're very much opposed to options that would be punitive in nature. Some of the work that we had all done over many months was very positive until last meeting kind of went off the rails, and we're hoping that you go away from the punitive actions that were contemplated and go to more incentive-based actions that can help the tenants that are currently there. And for our park, we're not planning on redeveloping. We made that clear, but others may, as their product, becomes obsolete. But that just, we're sticking around. So if there's any questions, I'll be in the back. Thanks.
Thank you, Russ. Next name is Carol Myers.
Hello. My name is Carol Myers, and I live at Lakewood Villa Mobile Home Park just down the road here. I'm not a very good public speaker, so I kind of wrote down my thoughts, so please bear with me for a few minutes.
That's quite all right.
I'm here today because I'm not just a resident of one of the mobile home parks. I can literally trace my family tree beyond 1938 here in Kenmore area. And it's very disconcerting to me, a lot of the issues that are coming up here. I've been watching you guys a lot on Capture TV and stuff. And one of the things, both with you guys and with the City Council, that I've not heard enough about is you talk about affordable housing, and that's great, but what about for disabled people and the elderly people? I have not heard enough information what anybody's plans for that is and stuff. And since I'm getting into my gray-haired years, it's a concern for me. There's some issues about that have been brought up about some of these mobile homes being older and stuff. And I can't speak for all of mobile home owners, but I can definitely speak for myself. When I bought my mobile home, I spent $50,000 on the infrastructure, new plumbing, new electrical. I mean, I've got a sub panel. When the guy that comes in, I can't think of the name, it just died in my brain, but and checks and looks over, he left with a smile, the inspector. And you don't get inspectors. I'm in the construction industry. Inspectors don't do that, you know. So granted, it doesn't look like much on the outside, but it's a lot on the inside. And a lot of these mobile homes are that. So when I'm seeing information about these mobile homes and how trashy they are and slums, yeah, there are some that are quintessential to that stereotype, but there's a lot more that aren't. So I'm all for the diversity, and I'm all for affordable housing, and I'm all for the density, upping the density of Kenmore. But another thing I haven't heard anything about, what about the support? Fire people, EMTs, police officers. What about the support services? Kenmore doesn't even have a laundromat. And some of these places don't have. They have to go all the way into Seattle to do their laundry. You know, and that's actually the nearest one. So, you know, one of the things I would appreciate you guys keeping in mind is the support of the density. And like I said, I'm all for us growing. I'm all for us bringing in. But please keep an open mind and a thought to all aspects of it. You know, I've seen it too many times. Redmond, I have family who lives in Redmond. People who live in Redmond that can't actually work in Redmond unless they're in the software industry. The people that work in the service industry in Redmond can't live in Redmond. They can't afford it. So that's just an example. I don't want us to turn into that. I want us to be Kenmore and be proud of being Kenmore and live up to us, because we do, here in Kenmore, have an extremely rich history. And I personally am proud of it, and I'm grateful for Kenmore and to be able to come back here to live the rest of my life out here. Okay, I'm sorry. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Thanks, Carol. The next name is Janice Hogan.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Janice Hogat,
Thank you, Janice.
and I live at 7301 Northeast 175th in the Inglewood Shores Mobile Home Park. I moved in there a little over 3 years ago. At the time, my husband and I, my husband is 70, I'll be 70 next year, we're buying this place to retire in, hoping that we would be able to spend our retirement years there. The place that we purchased from a sweet little lady that we had known for many years was full of mold and so forth, so we paid the $10,000 to have the mobile home pulled out and hauled away. We paid $35,000 to have the lot prepared, the plumbing and electrical hooked up, and because the neighbor had encroached on the side and there had to be 10 feet between my house and the neighbor's, I couldn't get a standard size home. I had to buy a custom built double wide to put in there, so it cost me another $100,000 for the home, and then $10,000 for the driveway and another $10,000 for front and back porch. And by the time I got done, I had over $165,000 invested in my new home, which I have some concern might not be there in a couple years, depending on what you and the council decide. So it's not an inexpensive thing to go in and put in a new home in one of these parks. I'm still 10 feet on one side and 10 feet on the other side. My rent at the time I moved in was only $720. My rent now, this month I paid $1,071. It's gone up $100 a year. And I can't continue to do that. and have it be affordable for me on retirement. It's more than my entire Social Security check. So I hope that the affordable housing that you put in place for the future will help those of us in our retirement years, because it's a 55 and older park. And that's what I would have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Janice. The next name is Deborah Bartos.
Hello, my name is Deborah, and I live at Lakewood Villa. I've been up here many times listening to the Planning Commission go over the future for Kenmore. I've heard the words density, affordable, redevelopment, and incentives over and over again. I know I've heard it a million times from friends, coworkers, people on blogs. Business is business. And this is progress, moving forward, changes. Even Bob Dylan sang about it 40-some years ago. These times, they are changing. I lived through most of that, being in my workforce for 42 years. I started work when a CEO was called a president, and he had a salary only 3 times greater than the highest paid employee. They walked on any floor and knew personal things about the people that worked for him. There was no such thing as $53 million bonuses for one person. No, that didn't exist. What did exist was moral obligations to people that the higher-ups in the companies would do the right thing so everyone would benefit. I remember when a handshake was all that was needed. The board met at the 101 Club, at the Washington Athletic Club. For people like me, I still call it the WAC. But when do we do the right thing? I know business is business. I've heard it so many times. But look around this room at the faces of the people that your decision-making could alter and change their lives forever. When is enough enough? Any one of these people in these parks could be your parents. They could be your aunts and uncles, your sisters, your brothers. Any family member could be one of these faces in the crowd. Your best friend could be sitting out there. Maybe from the outside, you don't see the full picture, but go inside and see how we live. Look at our homes. We celebrate holidays, birthdays. We have our grandkids over. We're families just like you. Where would we be in this world if we judged everything from the outside? Everyone in these parks have had a role in the community for a long time, way before Kenmore was established as a city. I think it's time we stop singling people out in the world. Doesn't that sign on Bothell Highway say, "Welcome to Kenmore"? There's no guarantee that life will be perfect. And at a drop of a hat, anything could happen to any of us to change our lives. Tomorrow our jobs could be downsized, locked out. Your partner could be embezzling one of the companies and the FBI meets you at the elevator on Friday morning. And it's not like the people that live in the park are asking for handouts. Everyone pays their rent to live there and be a part of the community. The people that have had this park since early 1960s have lived a great life because of these people. Take a look at these people in this room tonight. These are the faces. You know what I see? There's room enough for everyone in Kenmore. So tonight when you pull up to your house, put the key in the door, and sit down for a minute, look around at what makes your house your home. And think it could all be taken away with the decision of rezoning, redevelopment, and incentives. So when I look at that sign now that says Kenmore welcomes you, do they really?
Okay, I'm going to say a couple things. Thank you, Deborah, for that. One, I've said this at other meetings. I request that we don't clap or boo or everybody get a chance to speak. If you want to speak, you can do it up at the podium. But I don't want to discourage people who have unpopular opinions from expressing them. Some are popular, as we've just seen, some are less so. But it's not a football game. We're trying to make decisions based on the merits. The next person on the list is Stacy Valenzuela.
Hi, my name is Stacy Valenzuela, and I'm from Lakewood Villa Mobile Home Park. I just have a couple things tonight that I wanted to bring up, and I appreciate you involving us in all this discussion about the mobile home parks and affordable housing. One of the things is that we are appreciative and prefer that you do preserve our mobile home parks long-term. That would be greatly appreciated. We wanted to make sure, though, that there are some contingencies for the landowners, and that would be that infrastructure is one of the first things that are taken care of from there. The other things would be keep the rents and sewer and water charges low and affordable. The third would be that if you could structure the payments, if they are to receive payments, so that they are made sure to stay in compliance, because that would be a big thing for the infrastructure, because as Deborah said, they have been collecting rents for years, and some of the parks, the infrastructure has not been addressed. Also, in regards to that money, if it is collected, if there was some set aside for any homeowners that wanted to do asbestos removal and testing, as well as upgrade their homes and get some kind of help with that, some kind of temporary loan, that would be another great issue. Also, there was a letter in here from a management agency that talked about the value of our homes, as well as I think the last meeting you had discussed the value of the homes and the equity. I have pulled up several homes that are now for sale that are in the 20s to 60s, some of them in the 80s. The only one that is listed for $6,000 is the one that needs to be removed from the park. So that what devalues the equity of our homes. And it's a big drop down to $6,000. So it would be helpful if we did not have to move from our park. It keeps our equity, and we are able to resell our homes. I think that's really all I have to say tonight, so I hope you take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy. The next name on the list is Joanna Crocker.
Good evening. Joanna Crocker from Inglewood East. There's a little bit of misinformation out there, and I think Stacy just did a good job of cleaning up some of that. And that's the misinformation, or maybe lack of information part, is thinking that these homes don't appreciate in value. They do. In Inglewood East, several homes sold recently, and one of them looks splendid, and I think it was at least 45. Another one really needed major work, and I think that went in the 45 to 65 area, and they're probably going to be putting in about 80 from the plans I've seen. So these homes do appreciate their real homes. And also, there's a source of information who couldn't be here tonight. She's on our Homeowners Association board. That's Jan Height. She lives in our park, and she is the president of a real estate association. So we all may want to talk to her and get a bit more global information. The second part of this I want to address is the power of community, and it has heart value, it has moral value, it has economic value. And I'm going to open this up by saying that at one time I worked in Papua New Guinea, which remains to this day one of the most violent and dangerous places you can work in. And I lived in a compound where about a day after I left, somebody just walked out the door to examine some rare orchids and had her head lopped off. And let me tell you, when you live in a place that dangerous, you really know about community. So I'm standing here telling you that the second best communities after that one are these communities here in Kenmore. The power, the heart, the amount people help each other is just enormous. And there's so much data. You all know I used to work for the Office on Aging under the governor in Hawaii for a while. And all that data talks about aging in place. And when seniors can stay in the homes where they want to be, so many costs are reduced on every level, on the county level and the state level. And letting people age in place is going to be a whole lot cheaper. And in my community, those of us who've got a bit more information and are on the board and so forth are really interested in, if the Millards ever do decide to sell, we would like to do as the folks in Redmond and in Linwood did and purchase our community. And given the rents we're paying, it actually is really doable. And I think some people in our community don't understand that 79 units times somewhere between anywhere from about, I don't know what the lowest rents are, I think $600 to $1,000, that's a lot of money. You know, I think we could do that, and we could work out some nonprofit grants from nonprofits. The bottom line is keeping us where we are is going to save everyone a lot of money, and it's going to give you some really happy voters, and we may even buy our place, and if we did, we'd probably put more money in than we are now. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. Next on the list is Bob Humble.
My name is Bob Humble, and I live at Lakewood Villa, and I thank you for hearing me tonight. My problem with getting out of my driveway and going down the street that's right in front of Plywood Supply is you try to do that at 8 in the morning. Sometimes you'll sit there for 2-3 minutes because these crazy Kenmore trucking trucks with concrete in them are coming down the street and barreling down the street, and then there's cars parked next to the sidewalk, and you just got to be so careful. I've had about 5 narrow misses where it was about a half inch away from my car when I pulled out when I thought it was safe. And so the density that we have in our mobile home park there is enough to consider that it's pretty dangerous there. I mean, right now they need a stoplight for all those trucks and the cars that are coming from all the condos down the street, and nobody has brought this up. And it's really a situation where I've talked to a couple other people that have had the same kind of scare. And as far as density goes, it was like last Thursday night, I was sitting over at Safeway, and I was over where you could have your Starbucks drink, and it was like 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I watched the density of people come in, and there was like 2 people like every 25 seconds coming in that store to shop, and that's just kind of like average of what Kenmore is like with the people that we have here right now. So as far as contributing like 400 more people over in that area to pull their cars out and get out onto the road, it's going to be a dangerous thing if you decide to put condos in there. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Bob. The last name on the sign-up sheet is Daniel Stoner.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Daniel Stoner. Most of you know me. I own the park next door to City Hall here. And I come really as wearing 2 hats. One is a property owner and property manager, and as well as a developer. And I think I've been very, very open with you and city staff that we do have plans at some point in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe a little longer, to redevelop the park, but no plans before that. So as a property owner, I feel like we've come to you with the idea of really being collaborative, working together to try and come up with a solution. We manage the park. We know the people there. We want to be very humane, and at some point when the park closes, do it with dignity and help them out. And we're happy to work with you on legislation that endorses that idea. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the last meeting, and I was watching on my computer screen at home, and it was a little infuriating because it really went from the concept of using a carrot versus using a stick, and more of like a bludgeoning hammer, it seemed like, because these concepts of forced density, requiring a certain density level, reimbursing the cost for the homes at their cost, should they decide to move out or sell their home. Other components that have been proposed seem incredibly onerous and unfair, really. We have been providing affordable housing for many years here, and we will continue to do it for the foreseeable future. The problem is it feels like we're having to bear the burden for the entire city of Kenmore to accommodate affordable housing, and that doesn't seem fair. Requiring us to buy existing housing and turning it into affordable, which is one of the proposals here, why would we be responsible for that? Why are we responsible and not the rest of the city of Kenmore and the residents of Kenmore? It seems incredibly unfair. So that's me talking as a property owner. Now, putting the hat on as a developer, some of the restrictions in here are frankly unworkable. The market should determine what the density of the property is, not a regulation within the city code. If you look back, we've gone through one of the greatest economic growths this region has ever seen. And yet, in that entire time, there's been four multifamily properties that have been built in the city of Kenmore. Why is that? There are some barriers of entry there that are occurring. And so when you pass restrictions and tighten those barriers of entry, it discourages guys like me and other developers who want to bring housing that will, some of it which will be certainly under the affordable scheme, to this market. So I'd really encourage you to work with us to try and create legislation that accommodates the existing residents but doesn't prevent future development, because it's ultimately going to hurt the city's ability to create a walkable, livable environment that clearly the code indicates that's what you want. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. So that exhausts the names on the sign-up sheet, but if anybody else in the audience would like to step up and speak, you're welcome to do so.
Hi, my name's Janet Rich, and I'm up here for on behalf of Cynthia Little that lives in the park.
Was it Jan or Janet?
Janet.
Thanks, Janet. Where do you live?
I live in Bothell.
Okay.
But my ex-sister-in-law lives in the mobile home park, Lakewood Villa.
In Kenmore.
In Kenmore. And she's on disability. She's lived there 3 or 4 years, I think. And she's on disability. She has anxiety disorder. And so something like moving would greatly impact her life for the bad. And I just can't imagine if it was my home and that was happening to me. So whether there's builders that need to come, and because it's got a little bit of waterfront property, that's big bucks, and that's where people just tend to, developers, they're not thinking of those people that live in those parks. There's like 6 parks in Kenmore. They're thinking of the amount of money that they can make developing that land and bringing in people that have higher incomes. But you've got to look at the bigger scale. What's happening to the middle class is wrong. It's just the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And that doesn't bring community together. That just alienates people from being able to stay where they've lived for 20 plus years. And I just want to get up and say, do we need another tent city? We have problems already. These people already have homes. If something like this were to happen, where do they go if they can't even resell their home? And what do they do if they can't move into an apartment and they don't have
family that they can move in with. You're going to end up with another tent city problem, and we already have too much of that going on. So I would just like to say, on behalf of the human beings that live there, they're not ants that you just call a pest control company and move them out. They're human beings like you and me, and they have community. They get to be friends with each other. It's not even like an apartment building where everybody closes their door and you don't see that much of each other. These people have homes that are like the neighborhoods that have wealthier homes. They talk to each other. They go out and they garden. They get outside. It's good for their health. It's just so important that they get to stay where they live. And I just can't express enough of the compassion that goes into a community. And you don't get that just everywhere. In fact, if we bought up land and made more mobile home units, we'd have even less problem of people being so down and out that they had to live in their car. I've actually known a few people that live in their car and go to work, and you would never know by looking at them. And it's horrible. It's not fair. It's not right. And we need to come together as human beings and love on each other and embrace spend some of that money that gets spent on things that are nothing to do with a person's life, living condition, and spend it on upgrading these mobile homes so that they can have a place to live and call home, and like the other people have got up and spoken, can bring their families there and celebrate and just be happy. So that's my piece, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Janet. Would anybody else like to step up and speak tonight?
Good evening. I'm Bo Harrer with MHCW, but also, as of March 1st, the management company for Lakewood Villa. And just to reiterate, neither Lakewood Villa nor Inglewood East are for sale or have any redevelopment plans. So residents of those two communities. Oh, sorry.
You're addressing us.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Go ahead.
Third person then.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay. So neither of those two communities have redevelopment plans. They're not for sale. Nothing's happening. If anything, we would like to make it easier to revamp those communities. I went in on Friday to the planning department to try to get a permit to bring in a new home to fill in a vacancy at Lakewood. And there's a question right now as to whether or not there's going to be some sort of setback requirement because of its proximity to the slough. And I'm hoping to get a further clarification on that by Thursday. I think that's when the senior planner returns or the associate planner returns. But perhaps that could be something that the council or the committee could consider as well, as lifting those restrictions that make it more difficult to bring a new home in to fill a vacancy, or a vacancy that may be created in the near future should an older home fail, shall we say, and needs to be removed. And just to allow us to, like I said, regenerate these older communities, particularly those two along the slough for which there are no redevelopment plans. If anything, 15, 20 years, if not more, is how long they look to be lasting and remaining in the area. So I just wanted to put that out for those that are listening, to allay any concerns or fears about those two communities in particular, and for the committee to consider lifting any restrictions on bringing new homes in to these communities to renew them. Thank you.
Thanks, Bo. Anybody else want to step up? Going once, twice? I don't see any movement. 3 times. Okay, that closes the citizen comment item on tonight's agenda. The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes to consider. The first is the minutes for March 15. Do I hear a motion to amend or approve the minutes? Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Motions on the floor. Discussion or proposals? None? All in favor of approving the minutes as is, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. Any abstentions? There being none, the minutes are approved. For March 15th, the next set of minutes are those for March 20. Do I hear a motion to approve or amend the minutes for March 20? Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, do I hear any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes for March 20, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All opposed, raise your hand and say nay. Any abstention? The ayes have it. The motion carries. The minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda, Housing Strategy Plan Preserving Existing Affordable Housing. I invite the staff and their consultants to the presentation table.
Good evening, Planning Commission. So this evening, there are several things that we're looking for direction on. We're hoping that you will be able to finish your assessment of the options. You started that discussion last week. We're then hoping that you will look at the evaluation criteria, and both those pieces of information are in your packet. If you get through that, then we also have a little short PowerPoint presentation to sort of help tee up what that discussion will look like on the 17th as you start then looking at the options and then the criteria and how then you would assign those, if you like, to each of the mobile home park communities. I think you've expressed that it's not likely a one size or one option fits all for the parks. We'd then also like to chat with you about the schedule for a public hearing. We know that there is a lot of interest in this topic, and we anticipate that there would be a fairly large turnout for the public hearing, which may need to have the public hearing held over 2 evenings to allow everybody to testify. We'd also have a translator here, which then might sort of add to the time allowed. So I just want to kind of set you up to start thinking that this might be a process. Also on the 17th, as you are having the discussion, we would sort of recommend that you have a study session approach on the 17th to really allocate the full amount of time to that discussion, and public comment then would be held until the public hearing. So that's sort of something else that we would like to discuss with you.
Sorry,
So
citizen comment on the 17th would be set over to another meeting?
we would actually recommend that you kind of establish the 17th as a study session to sort of really take the full 2 hours to kind of be able to go through the options and the criteria and to be able to complete that task of looking at which options best fit each park. 'Cause we think it would make sense to have that discussion accomplished in one meeting, so that everybody hears the results at the same time. So that's the reason why we would suggest that, just so that you would have adequate time for that discussion. So
I was going to add that it wouldn't be that no public comment would be accepted. We'd ask that folks email in their public comments or submit written comments, and then those, of course, would be forwarded to you. But it's a significant agenda on the 17th, and
Yeah,
the
I didn't
hearing
mean
is
accepted.
right
It
after
would be
that.
removed from the agenda for oral public comment.
Correct.
Okay. I want to raise a couple. I mean, there are a lot of good comments tonight. We've heard a lot of these comments before, and they're each one is different. Each resident's experience is different. I understand that. They're all important, and I'm glad people are stepping up to say them. One thing that I think gets lost, and we tried to make clear what this process is and what the current state of the law is regarding zoning for mobile homes. And I sometimes hear citizen comment that seems to think we're trying to make it worse for the residents, or we're trying to kick out residents, or we don't, this is all about helping developers or something like that, or the current owners. So I'd ask Lori again to try and clarify for people who still might be confused about that, what the current state of the law is, why the City Council has delegated this issue to us, what the moratorium is, and what the expectations are for that moratorium. So go ahead, Lori.
All right. So last year, the City Council spent a lot of time with the Planning Commission developing an affordable housing strategy plan. And one of the proposals that came out of that was to look at preservation of existing affordable housing as a strategy that might work in Kenmore to address affordable housing needs.
And so one area that is being looked at, of course, is the mobile home parks. Currently, under the current rules, there are no protections for mobile home park residents. An owner can choose to redevelop the property at any time. They do have to give a one-year notice by state law, but the city has no involvement. There are no transition plans. There are no restrictions on how redevelopment can happen or if redevelopment can happen. So the current condition, which I've sometimes called the status quo, is that redevelopment can happen at any time. The city doesn't own the parks. The city is not in a position to close the parks. What the city is trying to do here is to be very proactive, so that, as I'm sure many of you are aware, there have been other communities where the issue of a mobile home park closure comes forward in a crisis. Folks have been notified that the park is going to be closed, and everybody's scrambling to see, well, what are the options? The City of Kenmore is being proactive and trying to think about what makes the most sense for these parks, given the vision of the community and the need for affordable housing. So that's why the Planning Commission is looking at these options, and then they will make a recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council will make final decisions about what zoning rules, financial assistance, other things that could be done to make it better for residents. The goal here is not to make it worse for residents, but to look at all options and try to make the status quo better.
Thank you. I also want to point out, and we've said this at previous meetings because we've been dealing with this issue since about October of last year. A lot of people are affected by what the City Council will decide. We're trying to consider the benefits and burdens on all these different perspectives. Residents obviously have a strong presence here, have a strong interest in this. The decisions that affect the residents would affect people who don't live in the parks. Rents are going up everywhere. Older people live everywhere. Disabled people live everywhere. There is a shortage of housing in this region. That shortage has led to an increase in rents everywhere in this region. If housing isn't increased, the supply of housing isn't increased, those rents will go up more and more sharply as more people move into this area, mostly because job growth is very high, especially high-wage job growth. So if places are never redeveloped, that helps people who are there, but it hurts people who live elsewhere, who are living in an apartment they can barely afford, and then they get a rent notice that it's going up next year. They get displaced too. They have nowhere to go to or nowhere nearby. So not building anything anywhere also has a very strong hardship on lots of other people. We just don't happen to see them here tonight. They're not concentrated in one place. They live all over the place. So we're trying to consider their interests too. That's why we talk sometimes about, well, maybe certain parks are better suited for development, for more density, because they're low-density places. They only have one level. Some of them don't have that many used lots. Doesn't mean we don't care about the people who are there. We wouldn't be here tonight if we didn't care. The city wouldn't have addressed this issue right now if it didn't care. So we're trying to balance those competing interests. In fairness to the owners, they bought these properties decades ago. They paid money as an investment for these properties, just like anybody pays money for an investment in a business or real estate or anything else. The benefit of those investments is that they provided affordable housing for people in this room and others who live in those parks for a long time. To say that suddenly they can't redevelop those properties or sell them for their current market value puts a big burden on them too. And I can't say that they've done anything wrong. They've only done something that actually helps affordable housing. But again, we're trying to balance interests. We're not just trying to say, oh, do whatever you want, otherwise we wouldn't be here tonight. But I just want people to realize there are lots of people affected by what we're trying to recommend to the City Council. We're trying to be sensitive to all of it. I hope somebody out there, or listening or watching on the video, recognizes that we're getting a lot of criticism from both sides here. We're getting developers telling us we're grossly unfair for considering some of these compromises. We're getting residents saying, you don't care about us, this is bad, and we got to be fair. And I can see each side's perspective. But our goal in our discussion for months has been to try and compromise these conflicting interests. So I suspect a lot of people won't be perfectly happy, but we're trying to come up with something that we think is reasonable to all the competing interests. Some people will may be able to stay. Some people may not. Some owners may take kind of a hit. Maybe not as bad as possible, maybe, I don't know. But the point is, it may not be as simple. There's no silver bullet solution to this. If there were, those communities in SeaTac or other places probably would have had an answer to this a long time ago. We wouldn't be reading about the hardship in the paper. But please recognize, we recognize the conflicting interests in this, and we're working to try and come up with something reasonable for all those perspectives. All right, Lori, let's move on with what we have, what you've sent us tonight.
Okay, so this evening, the first task to tackle is to look at the 4 options that were in your last packet that you didn't have a chance to discuss. And I think is
just, you can minimize that. Are you talking about the big square?
Is it read what attachment. Well, trust this is attached. Hey, look at that. Okay, so, yay, this is great. So this is, we took the options that you had previously discussed, and what we tried to do was put them in a format, a more concise format, and then to put in issues that we heard from you, and we're not sure we captured all the issues, but we tried to do that, and we can talk about that in a minute. But we also included these 4 remaining options that you haven't discussed. Again, these came through a variety of sources, primarily public comment. And so we just need to go through these 4, and you can give your perspectives. Do you want to continue it as an option? Do you want to take it off the table, etc.? So the first one is under the notion of long-term preservation, and it is to preserve senior mobile home or senior manufactured housing communities for the long term through protective overlays. So this would control redevelopment through rezoning and designate the park as a permitted use, limit other currently permitted land uses. Some of the issues that staff identified: could a park be preserved based on the age of the residents? I'm waiting to hear from the city attorney's office. And would the ability to rezone the property in the future allow future redevelopment? Now, last fall, we had the notion of an overlay similar to Bothell on a list of other possible options, and you were not desirous of continuing that as a possible option. This one's slightly different. It's focused on the notion of a senior overlay brought up in public testimony. So with that, I'll stop talking and you can discuss.
Questions or comments on this proposal? Yes,
Laurie, can you maximize the screen? Is it possible? Up in the...
Pull it down. Let's see here.
No, maximize it. Just up in the top right corner of the document.
Yeah, I know. I have to pull it down, I think. To get up there, isn't it right there?
Look right here on your thing. Don't look up there.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm needing some remedial help here. Sorry about that. Oh, yeah. Okay, there we go.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody?
Well, maybe just to start with just a clarifying question. So what are you checking with the city attorney on? What's the legal question or issue?
The legal question is whether a park could be preserved based on age of residence. There are lots of other parameters that might be used regarding the 2 senior mobile home parks, but the notion is an overlay. That's the issue at hand. Do you want to revisit the question of an overlay that would restrict other uses but would allow some uses and then would potentially allow rezoning through some sort of an amendment for the future. We sent out several versions of overlays to you in your last packet.
So maybe I can move the ball a little bit here by revisiting, I think, what I recall of our analysis when we first looked at this overlay proposition last fall. One of our concerns as a group was that when you set aside property as undevelopable for a certain group, that's that much less property that can be from which we can, or private sector, the city doesn't build housing, but the private sector could build more units and relieve some of the pressure on housing prices by increasing supply. So yeah, it'd be great for the seniors who live in this area that's rezoned as an overlay, but it hurts the other people who would be affected by the decision. I think our decision or analysis was, well, non-seniors then would have that much less potential housing because that's not going to be developed land. And the owners of those areas would lose a lot of market value because their use, the potential market value at the highest and best use, that's the phrase that the real estate industry uses for maximizing development, would be taken away. So we get one big winner and two big losers with that kind of scenario. I think that was our reasoning. If somebody wants to correct me, please do so. Any other questions? Sounds like Commissioner Baker.
Could you describe what you think the one big winner and the two small losers were?
Well, the winner would be the seniors who live there because they, there wouldn't be any change in the use.
Okay.
The losers are the two groups I mentioned before.
The potential
Well, the owners of the property,
okay,
because the market value goes way down. We just saw that graph by the grid by the staff last week, which showed there would be a loss of $12 million if all the mobile home parks in this area were rezoned with an overlay that prevented other uses. So they lose a big part of their investment when, in fact, we're helping provide affordable housing for decades. So that doesn't seem right. I think that was our analysis. And then the other group is everybody who's looking for more housing supply. Every acre of land that you take off the market to be potentially developed for more housing means there's less potential for increasing supply, and prices tend to go up for everybody else.
What I remember about that discussion, though, is we asked for what were the density quotas for Kenmore, and have we met some of those density quotas according to the King County Growth Management Act from 20 years ago? Because we're not trying to rezone to meet those quotas. I think we have been able to meet those quotas. Is that correct? So we're not really, the city's not really, it's not their responsibility to make sure there's affordable housing for everyone out there. I think as a partner with King County, we've played our role according to what King County has required of us. Now, there is a housing shortage, but that's not nobody could have predicted this 5 years ago. We didn't know there was going to be this kind of growth. So, yeah, I get your argument, but I also think...
It's not mine. I'm trying to restate, because there's not a lot of comment going on here, and I'm trying to refresh memories about what we were looking at, the perspectives we were looking at 6 months ago when we took this up. So if somebody wants to correct me, please do. If you think things have shifted so that we should revisit this, that's fine. Go ahead.
I think that I would like us to focus on the people that live here now, not necessarily, we're trying to strike a balance.
Right.
We want to serve the community that actually lives here now with the recommendations that we're going to make. But we also want to plan for the future. That's what a Planning Commission Advisory Board is doing for the council. So I think it's hard to do black and white analysis like that. This group wins and these other two don't. But what about the rest of the commissioners? Do you remember how we came to the conclusion that perhaps a senior overlay wasn't the direction we wanted to go, if that is what's at stake here?
I'm not sure.
Commissioner Mulcair?
Thanks. I'm not sure we took that on directly, the concept of a senior overlay, right? We looked at a general manufactured
mobile home
overlay.
Right. I think we did look at senior overlay before this specific topic came up for mobile homes. I think in the context of affordable housing generally, the staff presented this senior overlay idea. But, we can change our minds. I'm just trying to get us back to where we were when we first considered this. But go ahead, Commissioner.
So I look. These have now been reformatted and reframed a little bit. These options. I was actually thinking that an overlay concept was a part of the TDR scenario. I read now that it's.
It is.
Okay. We use it. You use the word covenant in scenario one, in option one here.
Versus an overlay.
Yeah.
I think the idea would be that if you were giving money, it's the concept is long-term preservation. If you were giving money to someone for the value of their land, you would more likely take a covenant than put an overlay. And overlay allows lots of different uses, and an overlay is a zoning that you could potentially change. A covenant, on the other hand, is something that could not change. I mean, it's like a recorded agreement across the property.
Okay. So, so the idea of revisiting the overlay concepts it just seems a little strange to me, because I felt like we've been talking about that all along. In the compensated model, right? In the TDR or the fee and lieu model.
So are we wanting to make it as flexible as possible as we make these recommendations so that there's many options, or do we want to become more narrow in what our recommendations are?
Well, let me clarify. I'm sorry, Commissioner Baker, but I want to respond to Commissioner Mulcair a little bit. Option one deals with the TDRs and the fee and lieu's.
Right.
As part of a rezone that limited uses away from mobile home parks. So whether you call it an overlay or a rezone, I'm not sure it really matters, but I think that's where we had focused. And we've already discussed that. So I think the difference is, I'm looking at this option question mark, preserve senior MHCs, which I think means mobile home communities.
Manufactured housing communities.
Manufactured housing communities.
Or mobile home parks. The terms are used interchangeably.
I know, we're juggling a little acronym juggling, but for long-term through protective overlays, and I don't see it now, I just see the overlay, control redevelopment by rezoning to designate a senior MHC as a permitted use and limiting other currently permitted land use without mention of TDRs or fees in lieu. So that's what I was saying. I thought was something that we declined to do months ago in the context of MHC overlays. If that's mistaken, then please correct me.
Well, I agree with if you're talking about just the senior thing and the rezone for that. But we were, I think, considering fee and lieu in the TDR.
Right. It's option one.
Yeah.
Right. We've already talked about that.
Yeah.
So this is a somewhat more much more restrictive proposal.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. The option question there, that to me is something I'm not interested in.
Okay. Anybody else? Commissioner Mulcair?
Yeah, just I'm not quite sure what purpose the overlay achieves in relationship to our goals. It seems these two parks on 175th are 55 and over parks today, absent any regulations, right? I mean, that's sort of a voluntary designation the parks have made, and I haven't heard any information through any of the meetings that we've had that that's at risk. or that isn't working or serving its purpose. Does anyone else know what we would be trying? Would we be trying to regulatorily preserve the senior status of those parks? And if so, is that necessary? Is the the voluntary adoption of that, is that working okay now?
Yeah, the idea, after all of the public comment, after all the comment we've heard, the idea came up again. It came of an overlay. It came up in the context of the senior parks. If you still are uncomfortable with the overlay, you should eliminate this option and go back to your first option as one of the allowable options. But it was incumbent upon us. There are several, as we go through these last four, I think all of them came from public comment. I don't think we're saying one way or the other. It's your decision, and the overlay was not to say that in perpetuity it would have to be 55 plus. That came out of public comment that it was for the senior parks. So, and again, we're checking with the city attorney to see whether you could even make that distinction.
So do we want to vote on this, so to speak, or do we want to discuss it further? Vice Chair?
Yeah, I just want to bring up a couple things here. So just to be clear, these are the two parks whose owners have said they have no immediate plans for redevelopment, correct? I'm looking at the criteria for evaluation.
Right, and we're not actually getting into the decisions about the parks tonight. The question is whether you're interested as an option in having an overlay version that doesn't have a TDR or a fee in lieu attached.
But it would
That's the bottom line.
But it would only affect those two parks.
Correct.
Which I would just note also have various environmental issues with redevelopment, and also have a very, I'm reading from the criteria for evaluation, have a high percentage of allowable density as it is right now. So just some things to keep in mind in terms of looking at the sort of preservation angle.
Anybody else? So I think we need to give staff direction here.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I guess I wanted to take your last statement, Lori, and just back that out one level. Because this sort of jumps in the middle, right? This is sort of the overlay concept with a senior designation. I'd be interested to know if there's any interest in an overlay approach absent the senior, right? Now,
that's certainly another option.
And that may be right back to our earlier conversation that's something that we discussed in November and decided that we thought we could do better, right? That there were greater balance opportunities for us. I just wanted to put that out before we get into the middle of senior designations. Is there any new thinking on the overlay concept generally without a TDR model?
Well, I think that it's there on option one, and we've already talked about it, and this is a kind of a new option or one that we don't like. For my money, I think restriction on age is, those kind of restrictions I don't like personally, because I think it's unfair to, if you're 51 years old, you're not, worthy, So I'd move to not consider this highlighted option, preserve senior mobile manufactured, what's the C stand?
Housing communities.
Communities for the long term through protective overlays.
Second? Once,
Can you state
twice.
it again?
Yeah, one more time.
He's moving to decline this
Yeah, I
proposal.
understand.
Thank you. I tried to.
I know. For the record, right?
Because we
Commissioner
don't have
Olson?
a second, I just wanted to add, it seems to me that there is a little challenge in throwing options out when we want to have flexibility on a mobile home by mobile home park site. I don't have a problem of creating another list, which is sort of, if you want to call them discarded options, but I don't want to lose them when we get to looking at them site by site, because I don't want to foreclose that as a possibility if we change our mind between now and then. I just don't want to lose the option.
I hear you. Commissioner Baker?
So, in other words, if we kept this, I mean, like, let's say your motion gets seconded and we all vote on it and we retain it. It doesn't really mean that that's what's going to happen. It just leaves it in there for our continued study when we drill down. What are the disadvantages of this? Why would we want to keep it in there as a possible recommendation to the council? I know what we really want to do is only recommend to the council things that are viable, right? And we don't have the answers to these questions, so we don't really know. I don't think we can just discard it.
Well, I submit that we got to make decisions, because if we've got enough stuff on the table that we liked. And for me, I mean, based on age, I qualify now, but, somebody could be disabled at 50 years old and want to be in that park. And it's working well right now. There's no problems right now. Why do we have to fix something that doesn't need fixing?
So you're just saying that if we had the overlay age-related.
Yeah, that's what this is.
Right.
It's not saying you can't do a fee in lieu and preserve the park, as rezone it.
True. Okay, does anyone, well, I'm not the chair.
No, but you're raising a good point. Something that comes to my mind when Commissioner McDonald talks about making decisions, we don't have much time left here. Staff has let us know that we've got a remaining agenda on this year's docket that has to be addressed, and it's going to be a time crunch as it is. We've got maybe 3 more meetings. We expect to have probably 2 meetings devoted to a public hearing because of the attendance we expect to get, the number of comments we expect to get. So I do think we're going to have to cut our list to the most realistic number here to be efficient about it, then go back and revisit stuff in the next few meetings that we have. I think that the balancing of the conflicting interests is much better addressed by option 1, which would preserve the current use of the park, would protect the current residents a great deal, but still mitigate the cost to the current owners who've invested in those parks. Depends on which parks, of course. They're not all the same, but we can deal with that one next meeting, perhaps, as the staff suggested. But for this one, I just don't see it being better than option 1, so I don't think we should spend a lot of time on it when we have so little left to spend. Vice Chair.
Yeah, I agree. I see this as kind of a blunt instrument, and I do think there are other better options. So I would second the motion, too.
Okay. Well, that wasn't quite a motion, but do we hear anybody else in favor of setting this one aside as declining to adopt this proposal? I think Commissioner McDonald is inclined to do that. Do we have a fourth?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Statement.
Yeah.
Just to let you know, I'm leaning towards the majority of pushing this off the list. But I will say there's something that we raise here that I don't want to lose, and that's the final issue, with the ability to rezone the property in the future, allow future development. I think we should hold on to that idea even with option 1, right? Because to Carol's point, option 1 does a good job of preserving the communities that are there now, but it doesn't speak to what 20 years looks like. So I know this isn't like a fully baked solution to future-proofing, but I don't want to lose the idea of future-proofing because I don't think explicitly address that in option 1 today. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Do we have do we have a fourth commissioner? We're missing Commissioner Vanderline tonight. Fourth commissioner to decline this proposal? 1, 2, 3.
I decline.
Okay. All right. Next proposal. Lori?
Okay, so the next proposals are toward the end of your memo, and these were ideas, again, that came out of public comment. One of these, the first one to look at is do not preserve the existing mobile manufactured housing communities, but build a new mobile home park for the residents. So that would involve rezoning property in the city and then somehow developing a new park for existing residents. There are a number of issues with this approach. Where would the zoning be applied? I think we heard that that needs to be less expensive land, which would probably be lower density, single-family areas. It's possible it could be nonprofit property. Question, who would build the new park? How would the timing be handled so it was available when redevelopment was anticipated? And many of the homes cannot be moved, and how would those units be replaced?
Comment? I know Commissioner McDonald has strong feelings on this. Do you want to comment?
Well, yeah, I like it because, you know, if you want to preserve manufactured housing, and we've got all these parks that the infrastructure is not good, and we know that, and we can provide, find some other property and you know, streamline it so that a developer be say, I want to make a park there, and I'm going to make some money on it, and then we'd have all these people that could move into this mobile home park and have the community that they're talking about, and you know, one thing is if the city could do loans or subsidized loans to the low income to move into those parks. If you want to save those parks, I think you've got to upgrade. And I think the best way to upgrade is to do a new one, because it just, you know, I looked I did Google today before coming here and looking at these parks in this end, and it's not good. It doesn't look good, you know, and I could imagine what the infrastructure would be. And if we want to take care of those people, it's the city's duty. I don't think it should be the mobile home owner's duty to do that. We're doing it, you know, it's a community effort to help the lower income, and this would be a perfect way to do it. And I think you could probably build something with these, put in the sewer and everything else, and the pads, and then, you know, and help people move over there. And then we could develop this stuff right around the city center that needs to be upgraded to make it, you know, a really viable downtown. That's why I like it. And I think somebody, I'm sure, I bet you some of these mobile home guys back there go, yeah, I'm going to be the first guy to take a whack at that.
You're a strong advocate, Commissioner McDonald. Commissioner McDonald's an attorney, for those who didn't know that. And you sound like one tonight. Anybody want to respond? Other thoughts, perspectives on this? Thanks. Commissioner Baker's telling me that somebody over here wants to respond.
Hi, man. Please. Yeah, just one concern on that proposal. All the options have some concerns, but there's just one that maybe isn't called out. Just my quick math on the percentage of the age of structures post-1976, which I think relates to their transportability, right?
To some degree, right.
53% of the total units accounted for in our comparison table are pre-1976. So that would be the majority of the units could not be moved to another park. So I think we'd have to contend with that.
Well, they're deteriorating right now. And so if you're really interested in...
Well, this building's deteriorating too, right? Everything deteriorates.
I understand.
But they can't... We would have to put some thought into what do you do with greater than 50% of the units that can't be moved?
Well, I understand that. But if we're really serious to want manufactured homes in the city of Kenmore, that would be the best way to do it. And you could get, we talked about the little houses, okay? These are close to little houses, and you get a lot more density than a regular, 35 square foot residential house. And it should be more affordable. And they can bring new manufactured houses on this place, and the people, and when the city could have a program to people to buy it with lower interest rates, and that, if we're interested in having manufactured houses in this city, I think that's the best way to go, because are we really going to save these parks over there is somebody going to bring in a new home there? I don't think so. So they're going to be a dinosaur as opposed to the, on the slough there. So, if we're interested in it, then I think this is the best way to go. If we don't care, we just want to put up apartments, okay, then that's your decision.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Yeah, I have some concerns about this, but I first want to check with the city staff, Lori or Debbie. It says 3-acre minimum for a community. Do you have any idea how many 3-acre sites might theoretically be available under any of these, zoning types?
No, I don't. And I think that that's if you all wanted to move in that direction, that's certainly a standard that could be revisited. So I don't think it's a problematic standard if the desire, if the conceptual idea is desirable.
Okay, so we're basically, we're not supposed to get into the weeds. We're supposed to assess the concept of this idea. Okay.
Right. And then identify, we would continue to identify the issues that would have to be flagged.
Well, I would just highlight the second one, who would build the new park. I think I mentioned this at the last meeting. There hasn't been a new mobile home park built. I believe it's in at least the last 10 years anywhere in the Puget Sound area. I think it sounds really good, but I'm questioning who would actually get that done. I'm also wondering why we would limit this to mobile home parks. Scott, I think you mentioned tiny homes or perhaps other types of affordable housing that could be built on a new city, not city, but a new type of property. And the questions about timing are really would need to be answered. So I guess I'm skeptical. I'm not sure I would vote to include it, but I would also listen to what other people have to say about that.
Well, can we ask some of the owners if they'd be interested in doing a development like that? Lori?
I'm not sure that this is the time.
Okay, I'm just throwing it out there.
Right.
Anybody else?
I will say that one group did say that if the zoning were right, I think it was in the R4 zone or something, that they could potentially be interested. I think we heard that in public testimony.
Commissioner Olson?
We have a lot of assumptions in that option. And one of them, of course, is whatever the cost is going to be for the land. And I think one of the assumptions is that commercially it might be too expensive, and therefore sort of losing that as an option. But we don't know where the council wants to go. And it seems to me this is a good option to have on the table, even if we can't use it. Even if they decide they don't want to spend the money for commercial space, if that's the only one that's available.
Who would be spending the money?
The city council could decide that they would find some other means for funding to buy a site.
So the city would own the park?
I don't know. I
don't mean to challenge you.
No. That's why I don't know. They could. But that's sort of, I'm looking at that as the weeds. But the concept is to at least consider it, even though it hasn't been built anywhere for 10 years.
Go ahead, Commissioner Baker.
Usually the collaborative, creative ideas like that haven't been done yet. So I think it is okay to leave it on the table as just an option to think about, because then they won't have to rethink that one. They'll see that that was something that we explored, but there's issues that we don't have resolved. And, you know, I think it's good to have some of that, the options that kind of push, well, that's impossible. Because we have seen a couple of the projects in Linwood and Redmond in the last 5 years that came up with some creative ideas to preserve. This is different because it's a idea that helps to further development by taking care of the displaced residents, which I think we heard in public comment is part of what our city is about or wants to be about. Still may not be feasible.
Anybody else? I'm with Commissioner or Vice Chair Orenshaw. I have a lot of doubt whether this is realistic. That a park would be purchased, be the first one in over 10 years in this city. There's a place that the city council would think is suitable. Right now, we have a small city. We have a lot of wetlands. We have a lot of steep slopes. There's not a lot of places you can build a new park. That's why the existing parks are really attractive as potential development. So I don't know where that would be. If you took a single-family neighborhood in this city and said, we're going to rezone to allow for mobile home park in the middle of your neighborhood, I don't think the reaction would be really positive. And I don't mean that those should necessarily be off limits, but our city doesn't have that much density already in its core. And so when cities zone, they look to build density and business in certain places and single-family residences in other places. We haven't even fully developed our core where the density would normally go. So to say, oh, we'll go to the cheaper places elsewhere, I don't think that's where the density is going to be well received. So even if we recommended this to the council, I don't think it would get off the ground with them. But I just don't, even if it did, I just don't see it happening because the market demand's not there. We've heard from the industry, the mobile home park industry, that parks are selling, they're not buying. Not only has nobody opened one, but a lot of parks have closed in the last 10 years. Kenmore's not a really good place to put one because we don't have much buildable land here to begin with. And then there's these sort of structural problems with infrastructure that have been talked about a lot tonight. Mobile home parks, they're hard to replace the sewer systems. They're hard to replace the underground infrastructure because a lot of people get displaced at one time. So now we're going to have, of all the affordable housing options, we're going to have the one with an inherent structural problem instead of multifamily units or small houses or something like that. Our goal here is to provide affordable housing. What's the most efficient way to do that? More mobile home parks probably isn't that. That doesn't mean we ignore the ones that are here because we know the hardship that creates. We're obviously looking at preserving those, but expanding those, even the advocate for the mobile home, manufactured home community, I'll think of her name in a second, Ishbel Dickens, said, I would not recommend a mobile home purchase or investment if somebody were to come up to me and say, where should I do my housing? There's just a lot of risk, and that's one reason we're kind of at this crossroads. There's a lot of risk when you do it. So I just see a lot of problems even if it were to happen, and I think it's just so unlikely, it undermines our credibility to recommend it. And the notion that, oh, one's going to open up just as one closes, that's even the least likely thing of all. The timing would have to be perfect. All the stars would have to fall into place. So I share the Vice Chair's skepticism. So I guess the question is, we only have 6 here tonight. We need 4 to push something forward. Do we have 4 that are in favor of pushing this forward in addition to our other options? I know we have 1. 2. We have 2 more. Going once, twice. So I don't think we have our 4 on that one.
All right, so the next one is sort of in a similar vein, but this one was not to preserve the mobile home park, but require the property owner. This idea actually came from a property owner, but require the property owner to purchase other existing affordable housing in Kenmore, existing apartments, for example, and then as turnover occurred, residents could move into these affordable units. Again, issues with this approach is certainly the timing, unless you were forcing people out of affordable housing so you could move the park residents in, that would be a problem. And if this was an extended process, how would maintenance continue as the park was slowly vacating? And this one reduces the overall stock of affordable housing in the city unless affordable housing requirements would be put on the redevelopment project.
Comments? We need clarification. Vice Chair?
Maybe this is more of a question. How do the economics of this compare to a fee in lieu approach? So in this one, they'd be required to purchase existing affordable housing, and I guess in fee in lieu, there would be some kind of fee in lieu. Is that a detail that we really can't work on right now? I'm trying to get some comparison to this to the fee in lieu approach that I think we all found had, I believe, some promise.
Right. With the fee in lieu, the property owner, the current mobile home park property owner is not paying. They're not paying the fee. They're getting the money from somewhere else. In this scenario, the property owner would be paying to replace the housing that they are wanting to redevelop.
The current property owner or the
redeveloper?
Current,
the property owner or the developer, whoever was getting ready to transform the park.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I followed that. Could you try that one more time?
All right. So in the fee in lieu option, the park is preserved, and some other person from another property is paying money to the owner of the property so that they recover their lost investment, basically. In this option, the property owner is not being compensated. They are, in fact, paying to purchase other housing for their current tenants and moving them.
They'd be selling the park for market value, but having to buy another
Correct.
Form of affordable housing to
Correct.
accommodate the displaced tenants.
Correct.
Okay.
So then part of the purchase price of doing the redevelopment would include this transition for the residents.
Correct.
That would be built into the cost of doing the development.
Correct.
You mean they're actually going to buy a home or an apartment or a condo?
Again, I didn't come up with this option. But the idea was that someone who owned a park would, there is other affordable housing in the community. There are others. Remember that first exercise we went through and tried to identify all the affordable housing in the community, existing apartment buildings. There were fourplexes, et cetera, et cetera.
Was this in October?
Correct. Last October.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
How could I forget?
Yeah, that was good. Anyway, so the idea that was presented was that, well, maybe the park owner, as they're getting their windfall from the redevelopment or they're selling to a developer or whatever, would then purchase other affordable, an affordable building, basically, and move tenants in. It was related to, I mean, obviously a very large park, this would be a very difficult proposition. We don't even have buildings big enough, but for a smaller park, it might be an option.
I mean, I could see you subsidizing the rent somewhere, but buying a place, that seems untenable.
Has this happened anywhere else?
I think so.
No.
Yeah. This is not, I mean, I kind of like, I like the outside the boxness of this. I like, maybe this, could work in theory, but I just see so many practical weaknesses to it. It's a somewhat better version of let's build more mobile home parks elsewhere in the city, and then at the exact moment one closes, that'll open and everybody will move,
Right.
and it'll be seamless and this kind of thing. But
I will say
Force,
that
go ahead.
a downside of this approach is that you don't, unless you put affordable housing requirements on the redevelopment, you actually reduce your stock overall of affordable housing.
Right. But even if, first of all, you could do that, and so that would shore up that downside. The second point is, and we've talked about this before with other rezoning, the more stock there is, the more supply there is, which gives more people options, forces landlords to compete, and keeps rents lower than they would be otherwise. So with or without affordable set-asides, there would be benefit to the housing market from that. But this one is another one where, well, let me just imagine myself in the shoes of an owner, and I sold my mobile home park, and I found a target property. First of all, that's a big leap. I find a target property that accommodates everybody in the mobile home park. Assuming in the very unlikely, in the unlikely situation that happened, I would then be negotiating with somebody who knows that I have to buy their product. I have no leverage. I mean, I would almost certainly have to overpay for that target property. So I just, all those things together just put so much weight around the neck of this idea. Even though I like it in theory and maybe with enough time, which we don't have, and tinkering, maybe there could be a way it could work. I just, in practice, don't think it's feasible. That's just one opinion. Anybody else want to throw in?
I'd just add in Detroit, Denver, I think they're, with the homeless people, they've actually rented apartments for them, and it's cheaper than spending all these
social
millions.
services on
right. Yeah. So they actually get a place and they pay the rent, and it works out great.
Was that Denver or Salt Lake?
I thought it was Denver.
I've heard Salt Lake did that.
Yeah, and it's worked out great.
Yeah.
From what I read, I don't know. So, I mean, that iteration of it might...
Yeah, but that's all public housing.
Well, I think they just rent from private landowners, apartments. I don't think that they build new housing. They just paid rent for...
All the homeless are in private housing.
That's
Denver.
what my recollection of it
was.
I've read it, I don't know, probably 6 months.
We're a little off the topic, though.
Yeah.
I feel like you and I are going to debate, which article was that? But that won't get us very far. So, but anybody else? Commissioner Baker.
Well, I think both of these last options start out by saying don't preserve manufactured. And I do think that, that kind of a scenario, get to the part where we are looking at the specific parks. So when we come up with I think having some scenarios that have that flexibility, even if they're impossible, gives at least a starting place for that recommendation, even though you think that would ruin our credibility.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah,
If you want to
I get that.
Throw your weight behind, that's fine.
But I think it does, put the property owner in it's not a very clean way for them to be able to maximize their investment or do a development, because they're responsible for what happens to the residents. And I think that's that balancing act that we're trying to come up with, is if we cannot preserve a mobile home park or prevent it from being redeveloped, what do we do about that?
Right, and that's why I liked it, the idea of it.
The idea of it.
It's helps both sides enough that I think it's a good compromise idea. I just think, look at this. How would the timing for this option work? Would the current apartment tenants be evicted to house? I mean, there's a big issue right there, right?
I mean,
they're not just going to walk out. This is affordable housing. They're going to leave it? How long would it take to have enough vacant units to have? I mean, just so many things would have to go right.
Sure.
I just feel, I do feel like we're only going to have, I think, a certain amount of ideas that the council has the time to really wrestle with. This whole project is, I know we all feel this way, and we're wrestling with it, and it's been months, and and I give staff credit for coming up with ideas. Can we make this work, make that work? Because they know we're trying to balance these conflicting interests. There's no silver bullet, is I think what we have to accept. And this kind of sounds like it could be a silver bullet, but there's too many. In reality, I think there's too many ifs and maybes, and gee, things have to go perfectly for it to work. So.
And the title of this section is Preservation of Affordability with Assistance. But, maybe these aren't the ways that we're going to provide affordability with assistance.
Yeah, but I agree with the staff. I want to noodle this stuff, and I'm glad we're, we're wrestling with it here.
Yeah.
I don't think it works, but maybe I'm wrong, and that's why I invite anybody else to rebut, my concerns.
And I think these ideas really, were generated because we did listen to our community, and there is a need. If there is redevelopment, what do we do as a community to respond to the need of relocating residents?
Right. So the short, if there are no other comments, I think the short cut to moving on is, do we have 4 commissioners supporting this idea? If so, raise your hand. If we have any commissioners supporting this idea, going once, twice, sold, so to speak.
Okay, so we're down to the 4th and last one that you hadn't previously discussed. Again, and I should clarify, it starts out, do not preserve the mobile home community, but the city is not saying eliminate the mobile home community. The city,
right.
This is a relationship to the property owner.
Exactly.
So the property owner may well choose to preserve the mobile home community, but the city rules would not put that
right.
restriction in place.
Don't rezone to limit use to MHCs,
right.
is really
right.
what you're saying.
Right. So this one would offer every new protected affordable unit in the city to the mobile home park residents, eventually freeing up the mobile home park, or even that is a technique that can be used for sort of a transitional assistance. So we have protected affordable units in the community. At the moment, we don't have very many, but we're hopeful with the TOD particularly, and we just made that change to the neighborhood business zone. So if we have protected affordable units, this option would offer those first to those in the communities that might not be preserved.
Comment? Vice Chair?
Well, in my opinion, I think the timing issue you raise is one of the many practical concerns I would have about this, and also just the idea of every new protected affordable unit in the city specifically for mobile home community residents. Is that sort of, creating I don't know, it's a preference, obviously. Has anybody looked at the legality of doing that?
And
I'm raising the question. I'm not a lawyer, unlike my colleagues, but
I know, but you're raising what I was thinking of, and I was thinking, we could wrestle with this one for a bit, but just this week, not this week, last week, the leading case on rights of first refusal got a lot of public attention because King County judge struck down as unconstitutional the first-in-time ordinance that the Seattle City Council passed. And I'm reading the summary judgment order, actually, that the judge issued. It's got all the reasoning for her decision. And she relied on a case that involved manufactured home communities and struck down, and I think the city attorney for Kenmore had agreed with this when we were looking at rights of first refusal and said, you can't set aside a right of first refusal for mobile home park communities to buy their park ahead of other people. The reasoning is that choosing a buyer is considered an essential aspect of property ownership, private property ownership.
He did
that
say
right?
that yes, that's absolutely correct. He did say that first right to rent
Yes.
could be.
Could be. So here
some
we are, but that's what was going on in the legal proceeding regarding the first in time rule. The city of Seattle was saying, you don't
Right.
get to choose your tenant.
Right.
You have to choose the first qualified tenant who applies.
Yeah.
And in the context of renting, I feel, the judge said, that making that limitation on the owner's property rights is unconstitutional. Here we are talking about giving a first right to rent. I like this idea. I really like, new units that are affordable and required to be affordable being available to mobile home park residents, I think is a great idea. But if it's unconstitutional in the context of what the Seattle or the King County judge just ruled, I don't see how it's constitutional in this context because we're talking about renting. So we could go back and forth on the pros and cons, but I don't think it's likely based on that case to be constitutional.
Well, I think there's another point, too, is that we could come up with contingency plans for transitional housing. But one of the things we've heard over and over again, and we heard it again tonight, is that it's different living in a mobile home park community and living in an apartment. They're not the same thing. So it's not really advantageous. It sounds great because it's a roof over your head, but it's a loss for the residents that are displaced because they live in a community that is individual homes. So though it is an idea and we could keep it, but if it's not legal, then what do we do about that? We can't really adopt it.
Can't really move forward.
Well, I disagree
Counsel.
in a little bit here
Yes.
because
Here's the other.
they
Yeah,
are
really.
vowing to appeal that
Yeah.
ruling,
Yeah.
and based upon our Supreme Court, I think there's probably a coin flip. So if it's heading there, we could put a caveat in there. If that it gets overturned, then you can consider it, because I think it's, like you said, it's a good idea, to make it available. I mean, it's the timing thing. I don't think it really matters, because if it isn't built and it's not available, then it's not available and you don't use it. But if it's a tool to help somebody transition, I think it's a great idea. So we could put the caveat on it as long as it's legal, and we are not going to know that probably.
Well, right now it's not.
Right now, well, no, that's one judge. It's a Superior Court judge.
Yeah, King County.
Yeah, yeah.
Where are we now?
Yeah, well.
What county are we in?
I understand. Well, no, you can.
I know you can
judges
have
in the same
different. You
court,
can have different trial judges.
Yeah,
I'm going to jump in here
Yeah.
while the two attorneys go at it. And
There are other
suggest-
attorneys on this pitch.
Oh,
I just want you to know
that. And suggest that the question of legality, I would say, should be set aside, and the city attorney can weigh in on that if
Yeah.
you like the idea. If you're interested in the idea, we'll pursue the legality side from the city attorney's perspective. If
Right.
you're not interested in the idea.
Okay, I like the idea. I don't want to waste our time.
Mhm.
So I don't know how much time we should spend tonight wrestling over something that may not be, that the city attorney may not think is legally advisable. So maybe we start there with the city attorney.
Well,
if we have 4 commissioners who like the idea.
Right.
Yeah, I like it.
2, 3, 4.
Okay, so what we will do is we will add in this concept, and we will check in immediately with the city attorney and go from there.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
All right,
Just a
so-
question.
Yes, Commissioner.
We do have this as a question of legality, but I also think that you could also be a facilitator, which is at least have all the names of these people. If it were to prove to be illegal, you would be able to provide those names to the developer.
Yeah.
He wouldn't necessarily be forced to use them, but he wouldn't have to be forced to create his own.
Yeah, which is fine. I do want to say one thing about this, and I think one of the owners brought this up back when we were talking about rights of first refusal, and the owners were meeting in their January meeting. It would be have to be the first qualified mobile home park tenant. just being a mobile home park tenant should not mean you're necessarily qualified to a new owner to occupy their unit. They set their criteria the whole bit, and that was one of the problems with the first in-time law, is he took so much discretion out of the hands of the owner. That part I didn't like about that law. But if they are qualified and it's legal, then I think it's fine, or even providing a list to give the owner a basis for the new owner of the new units of which some would be affordable. Does that make sense? Go ahead, Commissioner.
I think there's another challenge with this final option, which is based on my very limited visibility into what protected affordable rents are in Kenmore, and I think we've really just looked at the Spencer data on that. I don't think they're going to accommodate the budgets of many of the people who would be displaced from the mobile home communities. If we're talking about $600 pad rents and maybe some associated costs if they're still making payments or perhaps paying off renovations on their units. I recall that the affordable rents were something like $1,500, so that's a pretty dramatic jump. It may not.
Well, I'd ask staff to let us know on that. I agree that there's probably a gap, if that's what you're getting at, between what they're paying now and what they would pay.
Right.
And I don't think there's a perfect solution where they're going to get, a state-of-the-art apartment for exactly what they're paying now. But it's certainly better than going out into the market and looking for market rate housing. But go ahead, staff. Do you remember what some of the charges were for a two-bedroom affordable unit?
Right.
At 70% or 50% of median county income?
Or even 40%.
Well, I think the standards we're using at Spencer
85 and...
Was it 85?
I think they had a higher one. And then
There was one.
Yeah, there was
50%.
2 levels.
So a two-bedroom rent at 50% of median would be $1,080 right now. That's about to change because the
Rates are going up.
2018 area median income just came out. But
And it's likely to go up.
yeah,
Yeah.
it'll probably go up 8% or so.
I know.
Yes.
If I recall, the very small units were about 800, I want to say, but those were very small. I think those might have been studios or studio one-bedrooms.
Was that 85 or 50? Or
That
what?
was at 50.
50.
Yeah, I've got it right here.
But the actual rents that they're charging. We called and got the actual rents.
Yeah, this is what they're charging.
Okay.
That's their
slightly-
limit, so that's what
Right.
they're charging.
Right.
So a studio, it would be $840, and a one-bedroom would be $960.
Well, what do we have the 4? I want to keep going on. It's 847.
I think you had the 4 before.
Yeah,
we started
I
talking
know,
about
and
it.
I think you raise a really good point. I know Commissioner Baker's point is well taken too. I know it's a pretty raw concept here, but this one has a little more pragmatism to it than some of the others. So except for the legal part, I think it's worth keeping on the table.
Okay,
think we have the
so
4
we'll add this one, and
votes.
as I said, we'll check in with the city attorney.
Okay.
Okay, so second task of the night. That's great that we got through that. So the other thing that, I did that the wrong way, that we were going to go over, not park by park, but the idea is there anything in the left-hand column, these are potential criteria for evaluation, that should not be there, should be amended? Are there other criteria that you want to consider? So this is a way objectively to distinguish between the parks and help you as you move forward in assigning options to the parks. So size, how close the project is to its allowable density, consistency with the vision, age restrictions was added in here, the redevelopment timeline of the owner, How many structures are post-1976? Are there environmental issues with redevelopment? And then we have the other category. So the question really is, are there criteria that should be considered as you evaluate the 6 parks on the 17th?
Are there other criteria?
Yeah.
Right.
Or
Comments?
are there
Or
criteria?
are these acceptable?
Right.
Right.
Correct.
Yes, Commissioner Olson.
I am wondering if we should have a general catch-all, which is overall carrot and overall stick, in terms of, are we able to create enough incentives to encourage actual preservation, whether it's incentives or sticks, but the balance of those two. Because those are going to be the sort of the critical factor ultimately of all of those, whether we are likely to have a practical development or protected.
I think I like where you're going there, but I don't, it sounds a little abstract to me.
It
I
is.
want you to define it a little more. So what would we call this category, and how, this is a criteria for distinguishing whether certain proposals are suited for certain parks, right?
Right.
So tell me exactly how this new criteria applies to distinguish parks from each other.
It's an evaluation.
Yeah.
Or the balance of the incentives to have a practical preservation. It's so
that changes from park to park? So let's
well,
take,
it could because of what you apply.
give me an example, if you would.
Yeah, we'd need to have that in the left-hand column, specifics.
Well, I was looking for a conclusion that we didn't forget that we were trying to evaluate whether this is likely to be an effective plan.
So let's say option 1, is it likely to actually be implemented in Park A?
Right.
And then we'd look at it, would it likely be adopted and work for Part B? Would it invite investment that would produce the results we want, or induce preservation that we want with sufficient compensation to the other affected interests?
That was what I was after.
So would we simply add the proposals in the left-hand column?
Well,
you couldn't really. You'd have to do.
I think I know where Commissioner Olson's going here, and I think we can come up with a way to describe this. Yeah.
I think it's a broader, I think it's going to be sort of inherent in your discussion. It's not really a single criteria because you can't evaluate it until you've used the criteria to pick the option.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it will come out, and the thought that you've brought it up will make it more explicit. But I think that will be part of the discussion, and I can call it out in the cover memo, certainly.
Well, I think you're right, but I also think it's worth having as an item on the left side the likelihood that a certain proposal would be implemented in a certain park. So we don't leave it as, I mean, you could call it out, but if it's there, we'll certainly address it.
It's viability.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe
call it viability.
Maybe you could say viability, but would another term be feasibility? Or is that getting into the weeds?
Well, no, I think either works.
Okay.
I think they're almost synonymous.
They are.
Yeah.
Right, so I can add that to the left-hand column. It won't be filled in.
Right.
No.
Yeah, right.
Right.
No.
It will be as you discuss it.
As we discuss, we'll fill
Correct.
them in.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson and Baker. Anybody else want to respond to this criteria and either propose changes? Commissioner Mulcair?
Yeah, unless the answer to this is that by definition all MHCs are affordable, I'd want to know the affordability index of the different parks. In other words, is there, and I don't know quite how to measure that, if it's a function of the rents, if it's a function of the incomes of the people that live there. But ultimately our job is to preserve affordable housing in Kenmore, right? So if we had something that was definitionally an MHC, but, was $2,000 a month for rent, it would then sort of not look very affordable.
I see where you're going. We don't have the data for it. The information we have shows that I think it was 52% of the residents living in mobile homes in Kenmore were at 50% AMI or less. So I think sort of inherently you can assume that the mobile home parks are more affordable housing than stick-built housing, for example. So I think the presumption was that they were all affordable housing. We have sort of just anecdotal information about the rents, but we've heard several times what the general rents are. And then we have some information about purchase prices of the homes, but we have no information on, we can't get
Right.
park-specific information on income. We can't get it. Could get it if we surveyed everyone, but folks could decline to answer, and I think they may decline to answer.
I think this is the tricky part of affordability, is every person has a budget, and how they choose to allocate their budget is really up to them. But, if you look at it the other way, we want people to only spend a certain percentage of their budget on housing. That's considered, the norm, whatever. But I think it's very individual. And it would be very different from one park to the next. So how would we measure that?
I think the percentage that people spend on housing goes up as their income level goes down.
Yeah, I think you're right. But how do we know what that is? We don't.
Well, but Arch has given us, and staff has given us, the standard for affordability. The goal is to provide housing that only consumes 30% of their income.
Okay.
Well, then the big unknown is, what's their income?
Yeah.
Now, some people prefer to spend less. Some people have to spend more. Nobody probably prefers to spend more unless they have so much money it's a luxury. But, the housing becomes a luxury in itself, and it's worth it to them. But as Lori said, we're not going to know their incomes. We're not going to get a reliable measure of that. So, but I think you make a good point in
But
that issue.
do we put that as one of our left column criteria? Affordability, or are we just going to assume all?
I would assume all. I have no other data.
But then on a spectrum, not all of them are equal.
But we've got no way of distinguishing here. We have no data to support the distinction. So I think you have to assume that they're all affordable because we don't have the data to make that distinction.
And certainly the residents' desire to stay there tells us
Right.
that's their best option.
Okay.
All right. Oh, Vice Chair.
Yeah, I just had one
Yeah.
maybe clarifying question. I'm kind of wanting to get at the issue of the redevelopment potential, and several of these actually, I think, touch on that. When you list the environmental issues with redevelopment, do you have any sense of the magnitude of any one of these issues in terms of how they affect the redevelopment potential, or are you just identifying them and saying that these are things that are out there and may or may not come up in a redevelopment scenario? In other words, is there any way to qualitatively weigh these environmental issues?
I don't think you can weigh how it might impact a new development. I do think that, I think early on maybe we provided some information about setbacks and buffers and that kind of thing. And certainly a new development that was on the river, for example, would have a 150-foot setback against Swamp Creek wetland, would have a similar setback. So, that extends a ways into these properties. I'm thinking of the one on Bothell Way and the two down by the river. But in terms of how many units or anything like that, no.
Okay.
No. The only other thing I can think of is that we had one person testify in one of the public meetings that for that doing foundation work along the river was somehow environmentally damaging. Someone said that in public testimony. They referenced Forterra and suggested that there might be
Was
some.
that an opinion, or was that based on research, or what?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm just passing it along as a public comment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, anybody else on the criteria? So we've got one new criterion to add to the criteria. And otherwise, we're happy with the criteria, I think. Okay. Well, now's the time. Oh, as we go. As we go, yeah.
That we realize there's another piece of criteria we need to look at, then we would have to look at it for
You're
all
right.
properties.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay.
Okay, but we're...
So, yay. Okay. I now have just a very quick, knowing that it's 9 o'clock, PowerPoint, just sort of to get us all started thinking about this meeting on April 17th. That's your next meeting. And I wanted, in a way, I'm going back and just refreshing. I'm leading you toward information, that we've provided a lot of background information. But I wanted to run again through the public involvement so that if you wanted to go back in your notes, you could look to that. And then I also want to talk about the structure for the 17th, and then we need to conclude by talking about hearing dates. Okay, so on April 17th, one piece of information that you'll want to be thinking about is all of the public involvement. And you remember, if you go back in your notes, on November 14th, there was a presentation by Craig Hillis, who was with the Manufactured Housing Communities of Washington, and also a presentation by Ishbel Dickens, who was the private consultant working with homeowners. So you might want to look to that November 14th packet, or the minutes, which would have been in the following packet. Then on the 23rd, again, we had sent letters. Initially, we sent letters of introduction to all the property owners. Then they received their emails and invitations. And then on the 23rd, you held your roundtable with property owners and representatives. And all 5 property owners were in attendance at that meeting along with their representatives. And this information, you can go back to your packet and your notes, but this information is also on the city's website. So if you want to see the summary of this and go straight to one place, you could find it on the website. Then on the 30th, again, letters of invitation were sent to all the residents with the Spanish translation. You had the meeting. I think I was not at that meeting, but I think there were about 150 folks or more there. That's when we provided the interpreter, and we will provide an interpreter at the public hearing. There was the small group discussions and then the reports back to the full planning commission. Maybe it was Mike who was not here. I was trying to get everybody back up to speed in case you weren't at one of these meetings. But again, this information is on the website. So that's a one-stop place to go. And here it is. It's our regular City of Kenmore, Washington website, but then you just go Manufactured Housing Communities. Okay? Okay, and then you've had all this correspondence in your packets and the citizen comment. So the minutes are a good place to review the citizen comment if you wish to do that. And then, of course, the correspondence is in your materials. Okay, so April 17th, this is a very big agenda. And what we're hoping is that you will address all 6 parks at that meeting. So no one is kind of left hanging like, what's happening with my community, et cetera. And this is in preparation for the public hearing. Debbie already talked about how this would be a working session for the Planning Commission, and that we would ask that no verbal citizen comment be provided to give you that extra half an hour or 45 minutes or whatever to finish your recommendations. The public hearing is right after this, so everybody will have a chance to speak. Instead, folks would submit emails to me or submit written comments, and I would forward those to you. As I said, the public hearing will be held in May, and that's the opportunity for everyone to give formal public testimony. So on the 17th, you'll use this list of options, which I'll I'll get rid of the ones that you took off the table, and we'll format it. I might not put all the issues under it, unless you would. Do you find those having the issues there helpful? If you do, I'll keep them with the options. Yes. Okay. All right. So I will keep that the same way. And then just the reminder that all of these options are better than the status quo. And most of the options actually preserve the planned residential densities, which I know was an issue that you were concerned about to begin with. So any questions about the agenda for the 17th or where to find materials that you might find helpful? You can always email me, call me if I can help you as you're thinking about this over the next couple of weeks.
Laura, can you just forward this PowerPoint?
Sure.
To us?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you see on the last bullet point? What was that?
Oh, that all of the options that you guys are considering preserve the planned residential densities. Remember, you were trying to strike a balance at the beginning between wanting to preserve affordability but not lose the density. And so all of the options except the ones that, the overlay option, for example, which you rejected today, would preserve the residential density, which you felt was important to increase housing capacity in the city.
Okay.
Did that help?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the public hearing. Your first meeting in May, we had thought would be a day to do the public hearing. And that's what I put in your packet. But we're having trouble because we need to translate the materials. And we cannot have a meeting on the 17th and get it translated in time to send out to everyone. So we are suggesting that you hold your public hearing on the 15th. We likely would cancel that May 1st meeting. And then the 15th is a regular meeting date for you. But we think there will be enough public interest, and because we'll be having testimony interpreted that night, that will extend the time. We're thinking of holding it over 2 nights, perhaps starting at 6, and then hopefully going no later than 9 or 9:30. But the 16th is our second meeting date choice, if there's any way we could have a quorum on the 16th. So back to back, 2 nights. Everyone would have a chance to comment. We would send out letters with we'll probably send it out with some frequently asked questions and the options with the park information.
So you're asking, I think, is there a quorum for May 16th?
Correct. Or any concerns
Anybody
about...
know off the top of their heads that they cannot?
Well, the next 3 meetings would be the April 17th, May 15th,
and May 16th.
I'm here on the 15th. I'm not here on the 16th.
Okay. Yeah, how about 17th?
We can't get a room.
April 17th.
How
are we looking on April 17th? Because that's supposed to be a big deal meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So we're good, except for Mike on the 16th of May, which I understand. Mark?
Yeah, I'd be hard pressed to get here maybe at 6 because of work, but
yeah.
Do we have to start at 6?
Would 6:30 work? Could we do it at 6?
Well,
I'm just trying to give you more time.
Yeah, of course. And in fact, if we have our quorum at 6 and Mark is able to attend thereafter and look at the written record, which will be in the minutes for the next meeting, he could probably get up to speed, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be worth starting at 6 for that.
Yeah. Okay. The April 17th is 6?
No. The May meetings would be 6 to give more time to people to render comment at the public hearings.
So regular meeting time at 7 on the 17th.
Right.
And then on the 15th and 16th, the public hearing, we would start those 2 meetings at 6.
Got it. Yes, Commissioner Olson.
When we do the May hearing minutes, should we take the public testimony in terms of one?
That'd be hard to know. Let's say we get a long list on the sign-in sheet of people who want to render comments. You want to sort out the speakers by
Well,
Mobile
that's
Home
what I'm
Park?
asking.
Well, yeah, no, I just want to know.
Otherwise, we get all of that.
It all gets mushed together in some sense, because we're trying to pick out, oh, you're at what park, and you're commenting on the proposal for which park, and that kind of thing.
But
So I
could
think
have
you make a
sign-in lists by
right.
park.
I like it. Can we do that? That sounds like it would be efficient. Can we have 6 sign-in sheets?
Yeah. So here's what I'm struggling with. We also know that there's going to be overflow potentially. So we were trying maybe in the materials that we were sending out to encourage people and say, we think there'll be enough time for the first 50 people who sign up.
Right.
But again, that should be able to work if they do it by park. It'll
What
just
if
be
we-
harder for folks to know whether they're going to make it on that night, or, you know, you could.
What if we had 3 parks on one night and 3 parks on the second night?
Yeah, we could do that, but I was hesitant in case people couldn't make one night or the other.
Right. So what if we had, how many, you know, we're going to limit comments to 3 minutes. 50 people means 150 minutes.
Right.
That's 2.5 hours.
Right, correct.
So I'm just saying we limit 50 a night, and then if we still have need for more, then we'd have to consider going long on the 16th or
Right.
another
So what we
public hearing.
what we do on the 15th is what I had envisioned was sending out a letter saying, we're having the hearing, it's over 2 nights. If you're coming the first night, understand that it's possible that only the first 50 people who sign up are going to be able to comment.
Right.
And that creates a problem if we try to distinguish by mobile home parks, because I won't be able to know who the first 50 people are, because I might have 6 on this list and 5 on this list and 3 on this list. I can't do it. But let me think about that, and we'll try to figure out a way to make it happen.
So the only other way then is if it's not divided at the time of the hearing, we would then be able, by virtue of where people are living, we could ask them to identify which park they lived in, and then we could then organize the comments and notes to give back to you. So
That's
that
another way.
that's
good.
the other way of doing it.
Yeah.
We could have our own comment sheet too, so that we know if the person identifies themselves, then we could organize it.
You mean your notes?
Our own notes.
Commissioner Olson?
If we were to do it by mobile home park, you could set the time that you would start for that park so that people wouldn't necessarily have to come in for the whole.
Then you'd have people coming and going. That would be disruptive.
That's less my concern, because it'll be a pretty, you know.
Are we going to meet here in this room?
Yes.
What are you thinking of renting Benaroya? Safeco?
Is the room at the water district bigger than this one?
It's not that much bigger. The issue right now is that we have all the recording equipment and everything set up here. So this is sort of the ideal spot for it. And I think the understanding will be is we know there might be a packed house, and people know that when they come here that they were going to have to wait their turn. It's just unfortunately how it is when you're taking public testimony. And we're trying to give that flexibility to say that we are trying to have 2 nights where there will be an opportunity for as many people as possible to speak, and then if you still feel that there is still a substantial amount of people who haven't spoken, then we may have to have a 3rd night, but we're trying to at least set it up for 2 nights right now.
If, you know, you're proposing we cancel the May 1st commission meeting. If for some reason we can't complete our agenda on April 17th, could we continue and complete it on May 1st in time to still give notice for the public hearings?
No.
It's the same
It's the same issue that we
problem.
have.
Okay, you're right. All right.
And, you know, just to reinforce where we are in this process, these are preliminary recommendations that you're making. Then you're going to hear from a lot of people. Then you'll come back and, as a group,
In
consider
June.
that. Right, it would be at your June meeting.
First June meeting.
And consider what your recommendations are.
Right.
And then those will go forward. So you still have another
Right,
set
swing
of
at it
options to
even
consider.
afterward.
But it does make that study session, the concentrated, getting our ducks lined up so we really can think through them as we hear things too. Because we won't meet between then and when we present.
Any objections? Okay. Do we need a motion to cancel and then set the new meetings? Do I hear a motion to adopt the staff's proposal for the upcoming meeting schedule?
I make a motion to cancel the first meeting in May to accommodate preparation for the public hearing.
And then public hearings on the 15th and 16th of May. Correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Second? Do I hear second? Discussion? All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, raise your hand, say nay. Abstentions, motion carries.
Great.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, so any new business? Any announcements? This meeting is hereby adjourned.